James Stewart, one of Hollywood's best-loved actors, he starred in an amazing number of films that today are considered to be true classics. He won an Oscar in 1940 for his role in The Philadelphia Story. His easy manner and warm, relaxed style endeared him to audiences across the world. Stewart became a favourite of some of cinema's most celebrated directors, like Frank Capra, Anthony Mann, and of course, Alfred Hitchcock. As well as being an international star, Stewart had a noted military career, reaching the rank of Brigadier General in the US Air Force Reserve during World War II. His first film after the war was one of his best, and it opened the discussion with Joan Bakewell at the National Film Theatre in 1972.
It's a Wonderful Life. I believe it's your favourite movie.
Yes, I think so. I don't exactly know why. It just reminded me of a time when Frank Capra told me the idea of it. It's the first picture I did after I got out of the service. And Frank called me one day and he said, I have an idea for a movie. Why don't you come over to the house and I'll tell you it. So I came over and we sat down and he said, now, this picture starts in heaven. And that shook me. And he said, you're in terrible trouble and you are about to commit suicide and by jumping off a bridge. And an angel comes down and he tries to save you, but he can't swim. So you save him, and then Frank got a little mixed up, and he said, "This sounds terrible, doesn't it?" And I said, "Frank, if you want to do a picture that starts in heaven, where I have a guardian angel, I'm your boy." And that's the way it started.
Let's go back to how it really started for James Stewart, because your father had a hardware store in Indiana, Pennsylvania, so it wasn't in the family line of business for you to become an actor. And I understand that in a sense, your parents were never reconciled to the fact that you were an actor. They never quite approved, did they?
No, my mother approved. My father just, he didn't accept the idea of being an actor, my being an actor. And I think that's the reason he kept the hardware store in operation, because I'm pretty sure that he felt that I was going to be found out sooner or later, and he wanted to have a job for me to come back to.
But he nonetheless was quite pleased when you won an Oscar, because didn't he find it of use in his business?
Yes, the night that I won the Oscar, he called me very late and said that he thought it was fine and that I should send it back to the hardware store and he'd put it on the knife counter. And that's what I did, and it stayed there for 20 years under a cheese bell.
You joke about it, but he sounds a fairly formidable parent and some considerable opposition to your becoming an actor. In fact, you went to Princeton University and took a degree in architecture, and your friend Henry Fonda says that you are really an actor in spite of yourself, that in fact you were set on an architectural career, and the acting was an accident. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I suppose in a way it was an accident. I was going to be an architect. I graduated with a degree in architecture, and I had a scholarship to go back to Princeton and get my master's in architecture. And I'd done theatricals in college, but I had done them because it was fun. And then I was asked up to a stock company that was run by Josh Logan and Bertain Windust and Myron McCormick and Margaret Sullivan, Henry Fonda. I was asked to come up for the summer, not to act, but to play my accordion. I played the accordion in a tea room next to the theater. And I lasted one night. They said my playing spoiled people's appetites. And then they gave me various jobs as a prop man and as small parts, and I was offered a very small part in a play going to New York. So the time came to go back to college, and I just felt that having this tiny little part in a play on Broadway, it just seemed to me to be a lot more exciting than going back to school. And that's sort of the way it started.
In 1935, you went to Hollywood. MGM offered you a contract. What was it like arriving from Broadway, not really sure that you'd given up architecture even by this time? What impression did it make on you?
No, it was very exciting right from the start. You were doing tiny little parts in big pictures with stars like Myrna Loy and Bill Powell, and then you would get a big part in a tiny little picture that they also made. In the meantime, you were learning your craft by acting, which I've always thought is the only way you can learn it.
In fact, you were often working on several films at the same time.
Yeah, I was working on 5 at once one time.
How did you know which you were playing?
Well, it was pretty hard. I had to keep, I had to be briefed every once in a while. In those days, the big studios would trade you like they trade ball players. You would be traded to another studio, maybe for another actor, or you would be traded for a script, or perhaps you would be traded and the other studio would be allowed to use that studio's back lot for a while.
What did they trade you for?
I don't know. They said one time they traded me for 7 horses, 7 stunt horses.
You've appeared in several biographical films, of course. You've played Glenn Miller and you played Lindbergh. Is it more difficult to be convincing and natural in them? How do you approach that kind of part?
You have to make a thing believable without using the device of acting. And that doesn't make any sense at all. But I've sort of, over the years, I've developed a theory. I'm getting to believe that in films, what everybody is striving for is to produce moments, not a performance, not a characterization, not something that you get into the part and it's, you produce moments that create a feeling of believability to what you're doing. Now, the moments sometimes don't work. Sometimes it doesn't go, nothing happens. William Wyler has always been very famous for taking a lot of takes. And there's the story that he had this scene with a bunch of very competent people, a very important scene in the movie, and he'd already done it 30 times. And one of them came and said, Willie, I want to know what we're doing wrong. What do you want us to do now? I don't know what. And Willie said, no, you're doing it fine. I'm just waiting for something to happen. And that's what I mean by creating moments. Another thing that happened over the years that bears this out is that people will come up to me and say, boy, I like that picture you did. Now, they won't remember the name of the picture. They won't remember where they saw it. They won't remember who was in it or who directed it. But they said, you know that picture? You were in this room. And you were some kind of a lawyer or something. And this fellow was over there, and he turned to you, and he said, and I forget what he said, but you looked at him, and boy, that was some look you gave. And a great many times, you remember that moment too, and you thought it was pretty good. Every once in a while. I remember just while I'm on this, in this moment thing, I was making a picture in British Columbia, Western, and we were on the Columbia ice fields, and it was raining, and there was heavy mist around, and we couldn't shoot, so we were all huddled around a fire, and suddenly out of the mist came a man. And he was not a young man, and he had a beard. Wasn't exactly a beard, he just hadn't shaved for a while. And he was sort of a miner type, was dressed like a miner. And he came closer to us and he said, which one of you fellows is Stewart? And I said, I am. And he came over and looked at me and he said, oh yeah, now I recognize you. He said, well, I heard you was here, and I thought I'd come up and say hello. I've seen a lot of your pictures, picture shows, he called them. He said, but I think the one I like best, you were in this room. And your girlfriend was in the next room, and there were fireflies outside, and you recited a piece of poetry to her. And I thought that was a nice thing for you to do. And I remembered exactly the moment and exactly the film. I remembered who was in it and who directed it. And I also realized that that picture had been released 20 years before. And it made a tremendous impression on me, that man. To think that I had been part of creating a moment that this man had liked and had remembered for 20 years. And I'll never forget it. This is what I mean by the moment.
Magic moments in cinema was a favourite theme of Stewart's, and he returned to that in an interview with Mike Parkinson in 1973. But it was his distinctive way of talking that got the conversation started.
What about this unmistakable voice of yours? Because going back to the Screen Awards, you got 2 ovations. You're the only man I've known in the history of television who got 2 ovations. You got 1 when you walked on, and you got 1 when you said, wow. I mean, that's an extraordinary, but true. I mean, is the voice, it's not acquired, it's natural, is it? It's always been with you?
Always been with me.
In that form?
Yes, I don't ever remember trying to change it, except perhaps when I played Lindbergh. I tried to raise the voice, maybe, because he has a very high voice and he talks very fast. And he talks like that, and he's very definite, you know, and he doesn't hem and haw the way I do. So I tried to get at that. I don't know whether I did or not, but that's what I tried to do.
Did anybody ever suggest at any time that you should have your voice trained? That you should go to a voice specialist or something? And...
Well, not exactly the training in the voice, but I remember, oh dear. I remember I was in a play in New York, I played an Austrian nobleman.
Sorry.
So give you a little idea that I needed the work. And I felt I did need the work, but it was a play, very sad, terrible, sad, tragic play, with a young girl by the name of Greta Marin, who the Schuberts had brought over. But I somehow felt that I should give some suggestion of an Austrian accent of some kind. And there was a woman in New York in those days named Frances Robinson Duff, who taught drama, who taught voice, who people would go to when they got a part, and she would coach them sort of mostly in voice and mostly in projection and so on. And I went to Ms. Duff, and this was tough going, you know. It was $5 a throw for the lessons, but I felt that this was important. And she said, yes, I think I think we can work out some kind of a suggestion of an ad. But after 3 lessons, she called me in and she said, I'm going to have to let you go. Said, there's no way I can teach you an Austrian accent. She said, but any time in the future that you feel that you'd like to learn to speak English properly, that's the...
Do you remember the first part you played?
Yeah, Murder Man. It was I was taken up to the producer, and the fellow's a very good friend of mine, the casting director of MGM, Billy Grady, who was really responsible for getting me out into the movies. And he said, here's a fellow Stewart, and I thought maybe he'd be good for the part of Shorty. And the producer said, well, look, the fellow's 12 feet tall. How do you want Shorty? And Bill said, well, I thought maybe he might change the name. And the producer said, well, no, you want to rewrite the script too. You know? So I got the part, man, but I was still Shorty.
You were still Shorty.
And if you winked, you missed me in that one. You were just a tiny little...
Now, let's have a look at a film that you made in the 30s, where you are more easily recognizable. If you can have a look at it now, it's a film called Born to Dance, which I have no doubt you remember. Let's have a look at it.
You really want to go on the stage?
Well, I hope to.
Well, success and all that, do you think that'll change you?
Of course not. Why do you ask?
Oh, I don't know. It just seems that kind of success always does something to people. At least I've noticed it.
Just recently?
Oh, Nora, the difference between you and girls
That amount to something?
I wish you knew what you amounted to with me.
Tell me.
I know too well that I'm just wasting precious time in thinking such a thing could be, that you could ever care for me. I'm sure you'll hate to hear that I adore you, dear, but grant me just the same, I'm not entirely to blame, for you'd be so easy to love, so easy to idolize, all others above.
Well, it's pretty bad, wasn't it? You know, I had a terrible experience with that. Now, that's a hard song. It became a big hit, you know,
Yeah,
Easy to Love.
beautiful song.
It's a beautiful song. But the range in it is frightening. And I was a little worried about it. I recorded the song, but then when I went to the preview of the picture, I was sort of interested in what I would sound like singing. And when I started to sing, it wasn't me. It was somebody else. It turned out to be a fellow named Art Jarrett, who sang with the orchestra at home, that they'd put in because, but at the end, they, after the picture was quite successful. And at the end, they decided to leave my voice in because they said, you just can't hurt that tune, that Cole Porter tune. And so leave his voice in.
It sounded, in fact, as if your voice hadn't broken. You know, it was like a voice soprano, wasn't it?
Well, it's so high. Gee, I asked Cole Porter, I said, couldn't you cut it down a note or two? And he didn't like that at all. But it's the range, you know, the range is, and besides, I can't sing.
What about yourself in that period? Because you're thin now, aren't you? You must have been very skinny then. Did they ever try and sort of build you up into some kind of virile sex symbol, you know, muscles and everything?
Well, they had a fellow at MGM by the name of Don Loomis, who was a weightlifter. And I went up for a part to somebody, and they said, go down to Don Loomis and put on 20 pounds. Well, I haven't put on 20 pounds for 20 years. But I went down to Don Loomis, and he looked, and he said, well, we have to start from scratch here. But I got hooked on this. I got hooked on this weightlifting thing, and he had all the health foods, blackstrap molasses, and I did all this, and I did all the weightlifting, and I found myself for the first time in my life in the morning and doing this, and the muscle came back, and I'm looking, and all this, and I couldn't wear my shirts anymore. I had to get new shirts, and I got bigger around here. I had to get another suit. And all this, and I did it for over a year. I didn't get the part that but I got stronger. But finally, one day, when I'd gotten to lift really heavy weights, really heavy, and had gotten very good, I finally put it down. I said, I can't do this anymore. I thought, this is a mechanical thing. There's something wrong. I can't do this anymore. And in 3 weeks, I was back to 130 pounds, and I had to get a new shirt, and change the whole thing. So that idea of sort of changing my build didn't work.
No. So pursued by the ladies were you in the early days?
Well,
You speak freely on this program.
well, it was fun being a bachelor.
You had, in fact, a very distinguished war record. You went right the way through the war as an active serving officer. But what kind of welcome did you get when you got back home, Jimmy?
Well, it was fine, very quiet. I went, first thing I saw, someone had written, "Welcome home, Jim," on a sheet and put it up in the courthouse, and I could see it from my home in Indiana. And there were a lot of people came to see me, and I went down to the hardware store and walked up Main Street and said hello to a lot of people. There was a man, photographer from Life magazine, a fellow named Peter Stackpole, and he was there taking pictures, and somebody said, now, is there anything else you would do, that you would want to do? Would you go fishing? And I said, yes, but I must have said it in a way that gave them the impression that I had missed fishing all these 4 years, that I had kept receiving the magazine Field and Stream all through it. And I really wasn't that much of a fisherman, but I found myself in a boat with Woody Woodward, who worked for my father, and Peter Stackpole, and we were plug casting for bass out in a little lake outside of town. And I hadn't done it for a long time, and I kept getting backlashes. So then Peter was trying to get a picture of me, at least getting a cast off. In the meantime, Woody pulled in a couple of bass. I still was getting backlashes. And Peter said, well, I think we have enough. Let's go home. This is all right. I have enough. I said, no, one more time. I've got it all right. And I hooked it on something. And I looked. I'd hooked Peter's Stackpole. And he said, let's go home. Let's go home. So we went home. And then there were people for dinner. And it was a full day. It was a full day. But after everybody went home, and after my sisters and my mother went upstairs, my father sat down in his favorite chair in the living room, and he said, now sit down. And he said, now tell me, what was it like? And I said, well, I flew my crew down to South America, and then I went over to Dakar, and then getting up to England, had to wait in Marrakesh for a while because of weather, and then we finally got, and I looked, and he was fast asleep. And he never asked me very much about it anymore.
Real heroes welcome.
Yeah.
What about the getting back into movies? Because you started with a bang, didn't you, with a marvelous movie made by Frank Capra. It's a Wonderful Life. How did that, I mean, did you want to get back into the movies?
Oh, I certainly did.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a nebulous period in my career because I didn't exactly know whether the type of thing that I'd done before, whether that would be accepted. And it turned out that it wasn't very accepted. It's a Wonderful Life didn't do very well.
Didn't it?
And the next picture didn't do very well. And it was sort of falling back on that sort of thing that I'd gotten into, the romantic comedy, and the people didn't want that.
Yeah. So but before you go on then, Jimmy, can we have a look at the scene then from Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
I didn't realize, in fact, that it wasn't a commercial success, because it's a nice little movie, isn't it?
But it's amazing. It's my favorite picture, and Frank Capra's favorite picture.
Yeah.
Ah, Merry Christmas! Glad you come. How about some of that good spaghetti? We got everything. God. Oh, God. Dear Father in heaven, I'm not a praying man, but if you're up there and you can hear me, show me the way. I'm at the end of my rope. Show me the way. Oh, God. Are you all right, George? Want somebody to take you home, huh?
Why you drink so much, my friend? Please go home, Mr. Bailey.
This is Christmas Eve.
Bailey? Which Bailey?
This Mr. George Bailey.
The next time you talk to my wife like that, you'll get worse. She cried for an hour. It isn't enough she's slave teaching you stupid kids how to read and write, and you have to bawl around, eh?
Get out of here, Mr. Welsh!
Now, wait a minute. I want to pay for my drink.
Never mind the money. You get out of here, quick!
All right,
You hit my best friend. Get out!
You all right, George? Who was that?
He gone. No worry. His name is Welsh. He no come into my place no more.
Oh, wow. That's what I get for praying.
The last time he come in here, you hear that, Nick?
Where's my insurance policy? Here.
No, please, no go this way, Mr.
Oh,
Bailey.
oh.
No, you no feels good. Sit down and rest. Please, no, go away, please.
You said, Jimmy, that was your favorite movie of all. Of all the movies you made, that's still... Why is that?
I don't know, a lot of reasons. I just noticed that scene there. that scene, I remember when I first read the first draft of the script, and that scene, the little prayer, affected me. And when I read it first, when I did it in the movie, it did, and it did the same to me right now. And this is a theory that I've always had, that creating moments in movies, this, I think, is the important thing. Nobody knows exactly how it happens, but what you should do is to prepare yourself as best you can to make these moments happen. Because in a movie, it's really not so much the performance. It's really not. There are moments. There are moments, just like there, I think.
And in fact, coming up now, and let's have a look at it now. We've got one of those magic moments, actually. It's the moment in the movie, the Glenn Miller story. Miller discovers the sound, puts the clarinet in the front section, and gets the sound he's been looking for.
I remember in the preview of the movie that they used stereophonic sound for the first time, but they held it and didn't turn it on until
the ballroom,
the sound
with the band coming through. Yeah,
very effective.
Yeah. Can you define for us, Jimmy, the character that you've come to be associated with through all your movies? I mean, we've all got our very definite ideas of what Jimmy Stewart's like on screen, the kind of character portrays. But have you ever thought it out, analysed it yourself?
I really haven't analysed it very much. I imagine that sort of an overall look at it would be I'm the plodder. I'm the inarticulate man that tries. That I'm a pretty good example of true human frailty. I don't really have all the answers. I have very few of the answers, but for some reason, somehow, I make it.
Yeah.
I get through. When I'm at the head of the wagon train, for some reason, we get across the road. For some reason,
4 years later, Stewart was back with Parkinson. Now aged 69, his big screen appearances were increasingly rare, but people still loved to hear him talking about his life, his work, and his adventures in Hollywood.
These are the great days in Hollywood, weren't they, in the sort of 30s or so, and the industry, the film industry, was Hollywood. What do you remember when you think back, Jimmy, over the many, many years that you've been there and been a star there?
You mean...
well, what was it like when you, in the 30s when you were there, for instance? I mean, the studio system was going, wasn't it?
Well, the whole thing was so exciting, and the whole idea, they say there was a certain magic about it. Well, I agree with that. The idea of being, I was a contract player at MGM when I came from the New York stage, and the idea of being on the lot where pictures were being made with Greta Garbo and Jean Harlow and Lionel Barrymore and Myrna Loy and William Powell and the Wallace Berry and all these people that you'd see every once in a while. Everything was excitement. It was like a family, and it seemed that the whole town, everybody would gather at a wonderful nightclub, the Trocadero, and we worked 6 days a week then. And Saturday night, we'd all collect at the Trocadero, and it was an all-night affair, and everybody performed. I remember one night, a little girl got up and said, and her mother was with her, with pigtails and bobby socks on, and a little girl got up
and said, here's a little girl that MGM has just signed, and her mother brought her down once to sing a song. She started to sing, and she sang for an hour. There's a little, she was 14, I think, 13, 14, 15, Judy Garland. First time anybody, and it was magic.
Did she have the magic then?
Then,
she had it really?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a name there, of course, of one of the greatest sort of sex symbols of all time, Jean Harlow. Now, you worked with her, didn't you?
Yes, I was in a picture with her called Wife versus Secretary. I had a very small part, but I was sort of the boy next door, and we had been through high school together and everything, but then Gable was also in the picture, so you know, sort of. But we had one scene in the car, and it was sort of the goodbye scene. She was interested in other things and sort of saying goodbye to me. And I had most of the dialogue because I was trying to tell her my story and plead with her to stay with me and everything. And of course I had had months to learn it, so I knew it very well, and I did it. And the scene ended with a kiss. Now this was at night. We worked at night and all times, and she was actually on another scene in the picture, and I was on another picture at night, and we met and were going to do this scene. And Clarence Brown was directing, and we went. He said, "Well, let's just rehearse it." And I went through it, and it ended, and with the kiss. This is a rehearsal. I'd never been kissed like that ever in my life. With this. I just was born in Pennsylvania. Clarence Brown, the director, said, "Well, that seemed all right. Let's go for a take." So we went for a take, and the same thing. And if the last kiss, this one was a real barn burner. This this took me back a little. I didn't know exactly how to take it. But Clarence Brown saw what a good time I was having, and he said, "Well, why don't we do a couple more takes just to make sure?" And I spoiled the thing. I started blowing my lines, and he said, "Okay, we'll print that first one."
Is it difficult for you now to find parts? I mean, you must get offered an awful lot of rubbish, mustn't you?
I don't get offered much of anything. I mean, the parts, they're just not writing the parts, you know, great big parts for people that have been around as long as I have. You know, I'm old, and the parts just aren't coming like they used to.
You're still a great star, though.
I just,
you're a bigger star than any of these people coming through today. That's for sure.
The whole thing has been a wonderful life. I've been tremendously fortunate. I've loved every minute of it, and I have a wonderful marriage, and I'm a happy man, and I consider every day gravy.
We end with a classic example of why audiences loved James Stewart. Here he is on The Wogan Show in 1988, wearing his heart on his sleeve, sharing a poem he'd written about his favourite pet dog, who'd recently died, whose name was Bo.
I just made up my mind that I'd write about my friend Bo and try to make it rhyme. And it came out like this. He never came to me when I would call unless I had a tennis ball or he felt like it. But mostly he didn't come at all. When he was young, He never learned to heel or sit or stay. He did things his way. Discipline was not his bag, but when you were with him, things sure didn't drag. He'd dig up a rose bush just to spite me, and when I'd grab him, he'd turn and bite me. He bit lots of folks from day to day. The delivery boy was his favorite prey. The gas man wouldn't read our meter. He said we owned a real man-eater. He set the house on fire, but the story is too long to tell. But suffice to say that he survived and the house survived as well. And on evening walks, and Mom took him, he was always first out the door. The old one and I brought up the rear because our bones were sore. And he'd charge up the street with Mom hanging on. What a beautiful sight they were. And if it was still light and the tourists were out, they created a bit of a stir. But every once in a while, he'd stop in his tracks and with a frown on his face, turn around, just to make sure that the old one was there to follow him where he was bound. We're early to bedders in our house. I guess I'm the first to retire. And as I'd leave the room, he'd look up at me and get up from his place by the fire. He knew where the tennis balls were upstairs, and I'd give him one for a while, and he'd shove it under the bed with his nose, and I'd dig it out with a smile. But before very long, he'd tire of the ball and be asleep in his corner in no time at all. And there were nights when I'd feel him climb upon our bed and lie between us, and I'd pat his head. And there were nights when I'd feel this stare, and I'd wake up and he'd be sitting there, and I'd reach out my hand to stroke his hair, and sometimes I'd feel him sigh, and I'd think I know the reason why. He'd wake up at night and he would have this fear of the dark, of life, of lots of things. And he'd be glad to have me near. And now he's dead. And there are nights when I think I feel him climb up upon our bed and lie between us. And I pat his head. And there are nights when I think I feel that stare, and I reach out my hand to stroke his hair, but he's not there. Oh, how I wish that wasn't so. I'll always love a dog named Bo.
In January 1997, James Stewart died at home, aged 89. In tributes, he was called an American national treasure and the embodiment of decency and moral courage. But his friend Doris Day possibly put it best, saying simply, Jimmy Stewart had a wonderful life.
From Bruce Lee to Elizabeth Taylor, BBC iPlayer puts you in the picture with a snapshot from a life in 10 pictures.